and then came the Mariel Boatlift.
The trauma of the Mariel Boatlift. It's one of the most dramatic influxes of immigrants in such a short period of time in one place in American history. The first boat arrived on April 21st, 1980. The Carter administration met the crisis with confusion.
On May 5th, shortly after President Carter's open arms, open heart statement, 71 Cuban Americans obtained a U.S. Customs clearance for the freighter Red Diamond to sail to Mariel, Cuba.
The Carter administration said the Cubans were welcomed, that we might be able to handle 3,500 of them. The result was they came unhindered, night and day.
They are called Marielitos. As they left Cuba, Castro called them escoria, which means scum.
Fidel Castro himself publicly stated, "I have flushed the toilets of Cuba on the United States." He bragged about it.
With one fell swoop, Castro rid Cuba of thousands and thousands of undesirables.
For all of the decent, hardworking refugees who came here to make new lives, there were also the deadliest, most ruthless criminals that had ever been unleashed on any country in the world.
There are among those people murderers, rapists, child molesters, dangerous individuals.
We first noticed it with their shoes, the kind issued by Cuban prisons.
There was a prison on the Isle of Pines that had 2,000 hardcore prisoners. 1 week later, there were only about 20 prisoners left in that prison. Where were the rest? They were walking on the streets of Miami.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could take everybody off death row, everybody in prisons and jails and mental institutions for the criminally insane, and send them all off to some nice place where they'll be welcomed by some unsuspecting community?
Castro put a good one over on us. There are a lot of criminals who came over in the Mariel Boatlift.
I had never seen people like that in my life in Cuba.
They do not respect anything. They do not respect law and order. They do not respect kindness.
You know, they were public enemy #1 in Cuba.
Guys who were violent criminals under a communist regime in which it is not easy to be criminal. When they came here, then they became super criminals.
They have been described by the director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons as among the most dangerous criminals he's ever dealt with in his 23 years in corrections. We're dealing with a serious problem here.
And consequently, our homicide rate doubled that year.
I knew we were in deep trouble.
When the refugees were pouring in, the crime rate shot up 89%.
The crime rate soared. Women were being snatched off the street, raped and murdered.
In 1978, the city had 15 reported rapes, but in the first 7 months of this year, the figure has reached 59. 90% of the persons arrested in those cases were refugees.
Murder remains the #1 cause of death among Mariel refugees.
It amounts to roughly about 48% of our homicides.
People were being gunned down in bars just to see who was more macho.
Two men argued over a lawnmower repair job, and in the classic Wild West Matt Dillon tradition, one man challenged the other to a gun draw.
Cars were careening through the streets looking for the hospital because they had 2 or 3 wounded people in the back seat.
Mrs. Louise Thompson lost her 17-year-old son Michael as he refused to give a stranger the end of his cigarette. In return, he got shot with a .357 Magnum.
And they would see a car they liked and they'd kill whoever was in it and take the car.
The man who rammed several Metro police cars yesterday, injuring one officer before he died, was identified today as a recent Cuban refugee from the Mariel Sea Left.
Many of the Mariels who left Cuban jails worship the African idol Chango. They feel Chango rescued them from Castro's prisons, and others still relying on pagan rituals called Santeria before they commit their crimes.
Buying potions in shops called botanicas, potions they believe will protect them from police and make them invulnerable to bullets.
The police didn't know about Santeria. They would go to a house on some routine call and they'd find a cauldron with human leg bones sticking out of it and human skulls. Even the dead aren't safe in Miami.
It's now a community straining to cope with an influx of more than 100,000 Cuban refugees.
We don't have resources for the refugees right now.
We definitely have no money for additional social services.
Nick, we don't have any resources.
And there is not a single soul at the federal level or in the judicial level who appreciates the fact that the system we have in this country is set up for human beings, not for people who are not even members of the human race.
So the Freedom Boatlift is ending in controversy. There are those that say it's been a needless burden on our country and it should have been stopped long ago.
Why should one community in the entire country pay for the federal government's error in judgment.
The state of Florida has no Navy, no Air Force, no Immigration Service, no Customs Unit, no radar, no CIA, no Foreign Service to deal with foreign countries. The state has no way to prevent such new arrivals, nor a way of returning them from whence they came. Jimmy Carter has 6 more weeks to serve as president. He has been big on human rights. To protect the human rights of the people of Miami, he still has time to arrange an exodus back to Cuba for these undesirable Cubans. Airlift them to our naval base at Guantanamo, open the gate, and let these Cubans be returned to their sender. Good night. May the good news be yours.